let's talk about this idea that you need a lot of money to buy your first house. I don't know who started this story or why they started it, but in the words of Maury Povich,
that was a lie.
But you might be saying, wait, what do you mean you don't need a lot of money? I thought you needed 20% down to buy a house. Let's get something crystal clear. The down payment is different from your closing costs. A down payment is a small percentage of the loan that you need to put down in order for the loan to be approved at all. So if you want a house for $100,000, unless you qualify for specific types of loans, you can't get the full $100,000 in a loan. You need to put down a portion of that on your own, and that is your down payment. There's this idea that that down payment needs to be 20%, that if you buy a house for $100,000, you need $20,000 as a down payment to buy that house. And that, my friends, is not true. If you are buying this house as your primary residence, so you are the person that is going to be living in it, you can pay as little as 3.5% down. And if you qualify for specific types of loans, like a VA loan or a USDA loan, you can actually get in for 0% down. But for the rest of us that are not veterans or don't live in rural areas, it is 3.5% down to buy a house. So for that house that we're talking about that costs $100,000, you only need $3,500 as your down payment to get into this house. And you can even get a little husky to get into your house too. Right, Crixus? Now, what people get messed up, and I did as well, is that when you actually start to get into the loan process, you realize that there are other costs to this loan besides your down payment. So this is where your closing costs come into place. So if you're talking to your lender and you're talking about down payment, what they're thinking about is that 3.5% that you need in order for the loan to even get started. But in order for the loan to actually finish, for you to actually get the keys to the house, you need other monies as well to bring to the table. And that is the total amount that you need to buy a house. And those are your closing costs plus your down payment. So even with the closing costs, guys, it does not take a lot of money to buy your first house. Here's some facts. For my first house that I bought in New York City, which y'all know is super expensive, the total amount that I needed to buy that house was $22,000. When you think about how much it costs to live in New York City, 22 grand is not a lot of money to buy a house. At the time that I bought this house, my rent was $1,400. So that is less than 2 years money of rent for the total amount to buy that house that now I own. Now I can do whatever I want with it. And that house was specifically a 3-family house. So a lot of y'all might not live in a big city. So let's take an example of a regular city. So my second house was in Indianapolis. And for that house, my down payment was $1,400. Let me ask you, can you find $1,400 somewhere for a deposit so you can secure a place for yourself to live? At the time that I bought that house in Indianapolis, my rent in Indianapolis was $700 a month. So my down payment on that house was 2 months of rent. Sometimes I think we make decisions difficult because we are not doing the math or we are not being honest. And so if we do the math on this, my down payment to buy the house was around $2,500. That's about 4 months of rent payment. Do you want to keep paying $700 to somebody every single month? Or do you want to take that $700 and use it towards building equity in yourself, having a place that's your own, and not having a landlord jack up your rent next month just because they feel like it? So remember that down payment is just one portion of the transaction. You need all your closing costs to buy this house. So let's go ahead and take a look at the total amount of money that I needed to buy this house in Indianapolis. I want you to do something right now, and in the comments below, let me know how much you think it was that I needed in total to buy this house. So this house costs $136,000. Don't cheat, so pause the video, put in your comment, and then come right back to see what those numbers look like. So when you apply for a mortgage at the beginning of the process and at the end of the process, you will get something called a closing disclosure. And what this document is, it is 5 pages that every lender is required to give you before the day that you close, so before the day that you sign your documents. It really lists out all the different fees that you have to pay and your total cost of this loan. So let's go ahead and take a look at my closing disclosure so we can actually see how much I paid for this house. I'm all about the numbers and the receipts, so you can see how possible it is for you to actually buy a house
And so you can see that you don't need tons of money to get this done. So you can find this information on page 3 of your closing disclosure, which has a nice summary of how much you have to bring to close. This particular house, the sale price was $136,400. And then if you look at the top section here, the amount that I had to bring to the closing table was $3,691. So on the day that I signed the documents for this loan, I had to make sure that there was a check for this amount of money in order for this deal to close. But before this happened, I had put in other amounts of money into this to get the process started. Something else I put in was the deposit, and it is right here. So $1,400. I also had to pay for the insurance on this house for the whole year ahead of time. So the amount that I had to pay for the insurance was $1,294. So there's a $1,294 for the insurance, the $1,400 for the deposit, and then the cash to close was $3,691. So the total amount that I had to have available to buy this house was $6,385. Now, the seller did put in a couple $1,000 towards closing costs due to some negotiation after we agreed to the sale price. So even if the seller had not put in money, I would need about $8,500-ish to buy this house. Now, thinking about how much I was paying for rent, for less than a year's worth rent, I was able to buy a house. So now if we divide that $63.82 divided by the sale price of $136,400, so I needed about 5% of the sale price to buy this house. So that is way less than the 20% that most people think that you need to buy a house. Now, I did have about $2,000 that the seller put towards closing costs. So let's say that I did not get those closing costs from the seller. And so instead of that $6,300, we need about $8,300-ish. Divide that by the $136,400. So that's about 6% of the sale price that I would have needed to buy this house. Again, way less than the 20% that most people think that you need to buy a house. Now, a good estimate for how much you need to buy a house is actually around 6%. So if you are serious about buying a house, if you want to buy a house, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. You can do it right now. Pause this video and then go do this. Look at a house that is in the area that you want to buy. Find out what 6% of that sale price is. So 6 divided by 100 times that sale price. That'll give you a good estimate for how much you want to have on hand for your down payment and your closing costs. So if that number looks like it's something that's doable, you might be closer to a house than you think. And if you don't have that money, that's fine. But now you have a more reasonable number to work towards as opposed to the 20%, which is just absolutely not needed. Once you do that, let me know in the comments below, how much is 6% of the sale price where you are looking to buy? I'm really curious. Folks in California, I do feel bad because I know prices are definitely way more expensive out there. Now, if your major concern is more so the monthly mortgage payment and you don't want this extra bill, then make sure you check out this next video so you can see how you could actually buy a house and not pay a mortgage at all. I know, crazy, right? Make sure you watch it.